Join the Thinking in English Conversation Club right now. For just $2 a week, you can join with other English learners, practice speaking, have conversations, enjoy yourself, and use new vocabulary. We run conversation clubs every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 p.m, 6 p.m, and 9 p.m. UK time. So there's no excuse. You can join, and you should join right now. Join the Thinking in English Conversation Club, link in the description. Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast for intermediate to advanced level English learners. Despite being a tiny rock on the south coast of the Iberian Peninsula, Gibraltar is at the heart of constant arguments between the UK and Spain. Today, I want to discuss why Gibraltar is British, and whether it could or even should return to Spain in the future. You can find the full transcript for this episode over on the Thinking in English blog. Leave me a like, review and rating wherever you are listening right now, and join my Patreon for weekly conversation clubs. Here is today's vocabulary list. As always, you can find the full vocabulary list in the description of the podcast or over on the Thinking in English blog. Iberian Peninsula. Iberian Peninsula. The area of land that consists of Spain, Portugal, Andorra, Gibraltar, and part of France. As in, the Iberian Peninsula is situated in the southwest of Europe. Territory. Territory. Land that is considered as belonging to or connected with a particular country. As in, he was stranded in enemy territory. To cede. To cede. To allow someone else to have or own something, especially unwillingly or because you are forced to do so. For example, Hong Kong was ceded to Britain after the Opium War. To relinquish. To relinquish. To give up something such as a responsibility or claim. For instance, he has relinquished his claim to the throne. Sovereignty. Sovereignty. The power of a country to control its own government. As in, talks are being held about who should have sovereignty over the island. Self-determination. Self-determination. The ability or power to make decisions for yourself, especially the power of a nation to decide how it will be governed. For example, self-determination is an important idea in international law. Integral. Integral. Necessary and important as part of a whole. For example, he's an integral part of the team, and we can't do without him. At the very south of the Iberian Peninsula, just below the Spanish city of La Linea, and only a few kilometers away from the coast of Africa, lies a 5-kilometer long and 1-kilometer wide piece of land. It has no rivers or natural springs, no agriculture or farms, and a population of around just 30,000 people, and is home to the only population of wild monkeys in Europe. This tiny rock is known to the world as Gibraltar. At first, Gibraltar may seem insignificant to most people. But Gibraltar is a uniquely important and controversial piece of territory. Although bordering Spain, Gibraltar has actually been a British territory for hundreds of years. The citizens of the Rock are British citizens and largely English-speaking. In fact, the people of Gibraltar have been described as more British and more patriotic than people from Britain. However, not everything is simple. the status of Gibraltar is disputed by Spain and the Spanish government, who claim the land as part of Spain. And Brexit, or Britain exiting the EU, has made things even more complicated, leaving the British Overseas Territory in an uncomfortable position. Today, I want to investigate the case of Gibraltar. Why is it not part of Spain? And how did it become a British Overseas Territory? We'll look at the political identity of Gibraltar, its history and how it became British, the current situation, and maybe the future of the rock. But before I do this, I would like to quickly address the controversial nature of this topic. I've talked about territorial and land disputes before, about Taiwan and the Falkland Islands. And while most of the comments I received were amazing and interesting, I especially love reading comments from people who have their own opinions, I did receive a few horrible messages. So if you have a strong opinion about Gibraltar, maybe if you're Spanish, please be nice when you message me. Please be kind when you message. My aim with this episode is to introduce the topic, look at the history, and discuss the possible future. But I will tell you about my opinion on the issue right now, so no one is confused and you don't have to guess. I am a strong supporter of the right to self-determination. I believe the rights of the people to decide their own fate and government is more important than countries arguing about land. So I believe that the people living on Gibraltar, not the governments of the UK, Spain or the EU, should be the only ones deciding their political future. Okay, that's enough of my opinion for now. Let's get into this episode. Let's start with the location of Gibraltar. Where is it? Gibraltar is located on the southern edge of the Iberian Peninsula. The Iberian Peninsula is an area containing most of Spain and Portugal. Gibraltar itself is also a peninsula, although a much smaller one, meaning that it is surrounded mostly by water and only connected to land by a relatively small border. Gibraltar is connected to Spain by a narrow isthmus, or narrow strip of land, that connects to a larger landmass. It is famously known as the Rock, due to its appearance as a large ridge jutting out of the ocean. It is directly south of the Spanish city of La Linea and surrounded by the Bay of Gibraltar and the Strait of Gibraltar. The Strait of Gibraltar is the boundary between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea, where the distance between Europe and Africa is only a few kilometers. This makes it a very valuable and tactically important piece of sea. Around half of the world's seaborne trade passes through the Strait of Gibraltar every year, giving the countries who control it or used to control it a lot of power. Is Gibraltar a country? No. Is it part of the UK? Kind of, but not exactly. Gibraltar is a British Overseas Territory. British Overseas Territories are the last remnants, the last remainders of the British Empire, and consist of 14 territories with a historical link to Britain. British Overseas Territories usually have their own governments, they are self-governing. This means that Gibraltar has its own government. They have a parliament and an elected chief minister. Britain, however, is responsible for the territory's defence and international relations. So Gibraltar, like other overseas territories, is a peculiar and complicated political thing. It is both connected to the UK and able to make its own decisions and political choices. It is geographically far from Britain, but culturally and linguistically similar. How did this unusual partnership or relationship begin? Why is Gibraltar part of the UK? Well, to answer this question, we have to go back and look at the history. evidence suggests that people have lived in or around Gibraltar for thousands of years. Evidence of Neanderthal and early human settlements has been found in the rocks caves. The ancient Greeks considered Gibraltar to be one of the Pillars of Hercules, and it was known and visited by ancient peoples including the Phoenicians. In the Middle Ages, Gibraltar was briefly controlled by the Vandals and later became part of a Visigoth kingdom until the year 711. In 710, a Berber army invaded Spain from North Africa, under the command of Tariq ibn Ziyad. This invasion eventually led to the Islamic conquest of the entire Iberian Peninsula. Gibraltar was named Jabal Tariq, or the Mount of Tariq, which eventually became the name Gibraltar, Jabal Tariq, Gibraltar. The Muslim rulers controlled Gibraltar for centuries, and an example of this can still be seen in Gibraltar, with the remains of a Moorish castle. The Christians took over the territory in the year 1462, and the Spanish Catholic monarchs Isabel and Fernando secured Gibraltar as part of Spain. So Gibraltar has a long history, but how did it leave the hands of the Spanish and become a British territory? In 1700, the Spanish King Charles II died without a clear heir. A war broke out between different groups who wanted to take over the monarchy, and this war today is known as the Spanish War of Succession. In 1704, British and Dutch forces took control of Gibraltar on the request of Charles of Austria, one of the active participants in the War of Succession. Britain and the Netherlands wanted to stop France from taking full control of Spain, and taking control of Gibraltar, as well as defending Portugal, were part of this plan. The War of Succession concluded in 1713 with the Treaty of Utrecht, which decided that the grandson of the King of France would become the new Spanish king. The Treaty of Utrecht also ceded Gibraltar to Britain permanently. Britain kept control of Gibraltar with relative ease over the next few centuries. One exception would be the siege of Gibraltar by France and Spain in the late 18th century, but the Rock resisted and remained a key part of Britain's empire. The 19th century was the peak of Gibraltar's influence. It became a vital port on the British trading route to India, allowing sailors and ships to stop over, rest, and store their goods. Ships would sail from Britain through the Strait of Gibraltar into the Mediterranean Sea and onto the Suez Canal. In the 20th century, Gibraltar also played an important role in the Second World War. It became home to the British Royal Navy's Force H, and Eisenhower used Gibraltar as a base to plan and control the Americans' landings in North Africa in 1942. Gibraltar has been a British territory for over 300 years at this point, and there is a famous legend that while there are monkeys on Gibraltar, it will remain British. Yet Spain has not and is not happy with this situation. Since the regime of the Spanish dictator Francisco Franco, Spain has had an official policy for the reclamation of the territory. In other words, Spain's government officially demands Britain return Gibraltar to Spain. After World War II, the British Empire basically collapsed, and the majority of colonies became independent or were let go by Britain. Gibraltar seemed to be heading down a similar path, but there was a problem. The people of Gibraltar do not want to be part of Spain. Gibraltar does not want to be Spanish. The Treaty of Utrecht gave Britain control of Gibraltar forever. However, it also included a rule that if Britain ever decided to relinquish control of Gibraltar, Spain would get first choice on whether to take Gibraltar back. In 1967, Gibraltar voted in a referendum, They could choose to either stay in close association with Britain or become Spanish. And the result was almost unanimous, to stay part of Britain's territories. Spain was so angry with this result that they closed the border between Spain and Gibraltar until 1985, when they wanted to join the EU and Britain was blocking them. In the 1990s and early 2000s, Britain and Spain negotiated a New Deal, which would have resulted in joint sovereignty over Gibraltar. Gibraltar would have been basically both British and Spanish. Again, this was completely rejected by the people of Gibraltar in a referendum. They didn't want to be Spanish. No political party in Gibraltar supports a union with Spain. In 2000, the Gibraltar Parliament issued a declaration that stated, "The people of Gibraltar will never compromise, give up, or trade their sovereignty or their right to self-determination. That Gibraltar wants good, neighbourly European relations with Spain, and that Gibraltar belongs to the people of Gibraltar, and is neither Spain's to claim nor Britain's to give away. The UK will no longer negotiate the status of Gibraltar, unless the Gibraltar government is involved in the discussions." This infuriates Spain, as the Spanish are aware the Gibraltarians will unlikely, never, support a return to Spain. So what is the exact British position on Gibraltar? The UK believes that Gibraltar has the right to self-determination. Self-determination is a key principle of international law that states peoples, based on respect for the principle of equal rights and fair equality of opportunity, have the right to freely choose their sovereignty. In other words, people should be able to decide their own future for themselves. Therefore, Britain will no longer negotiate the issue of Gibraltar without Gibraltar being involved in the process. Britain has also ruled out Gibraltar becoming independent. This again is due to Spain. Spain would have to consent to Gibraltar becoming independent, which Britain doesn't want to risk. So, Britain's position is that Gibraltar will stay as a British overseas territory if that is what the people of Gibraltar want. What is the Spanish position on Gibraltar? Spain bases its claim to own Gibraltar on an idea called territorial integrity. Basically, Gibraltar was and is an integral part of Spanish territory, in history and tradition, and therefore should be controlled by Spain today. Spain sees Gibraltar as a British colony. From the perspective of Spain, Gibraltarians, the people of Gibraltar, are settlers from the United Kingdom, and their right to self-determination doesn't matter. They support this argument through the fact that only 100 Spanish inhabitants of Gibraltar remained when Britain took control of the rock 300 years ago. Spain, therefore, does not care about the ideas and interests of the people of Gibraltar. Spain believes that the matter can be settled directly by communication and negotiation between Spain and the UK. Gibraltar and their government and their parliament and the people of Gibraltar should not be involved in the process. Only Spain and the UK government. And this is clearly different from the British perspective, that Gibraltar needs to be part of the discussions and Britain won't do anything unless Gibraltar agrees. What is Gibraltar's position on Gibraltar? Gibraltar completely disagrees with the Spanish government. They believe that the right to self-determination clearly applies to Gibraltar. While Gibraltar has friendly relations with Spanish people and visitors, they are very suspicious and mistrustful of the Spanish government. There have been 2 referendums on the issue of Gibraltar's sovereignty, both rejected any role for Spain. In 2022, the Chief Minister of Gibraltar, Fabian Picardo, said Gibraltar will never be Spanish. In fact, for the people in Gibraltar, the most important issue, political issue, is not the economy or social policies like in most countries, but ensuring that they will never be Spanish. Hopefully, I've done an adequate job at explaining the different positions of the UK, Spain, and Gibraltar. In a nutshell, Spain wants Gibraltar back from Britain. Gibraltar never wants to be Spanish, and the UK will only do what Gibraltar wants. One issue that has complicated Gibraltar's sovereignty is Brexit. The UK voted to leave the European Union in 2016, but almost 100% of Gibraltar's residents voted to stay. Gibraltar was the only British overseas territory to be part of the EU, and when the UK left, so did Gibraltar. Spain has attempted to use Brexit as an opportunity to push for Spanish control over the territory. There are some major issues causing problems for Gibraltar now they are not part of the EU. The movement of people, goods, and air travel is currently being negotiated. Spain has a much higher unemployment rate than Gibraltar, leading to many people in towns close to Gibraltar looking for work in the territory. And the territory's finance industry and tax arrangements are always an issue. However, while the people of Gibraltar certainly want a smooth relationship and relatively open border with Spain, right now it seems very unlikely that they will ever choose to become Spanish again. So here is today's final thought. Why is Gibraltar British? The simple explanation is that Britain was given control of Gibraltar during the Spanish War of Succession. Now, the territory is very British and English-speaking, and does not want to be Spanish. As I said at the beginning of my episode, I am a big believer in the right to self-determination. I think people should be able to decide for themselves who governs them and who governs their land. I think people are more important than countries arguing over pieces of territory. For me, the only people who should be deciding the future of Gibraltar are the people living there. The British government, and in particular the Spanish government, need to respect the wishes of the people of Gibraltar. And this is the same opinion I have for almost every territorial dispute around the world. In Scotland, during the Scottish referendum, I think that's the perfect example of people should be allowed to decide for themselves. In the Falkland Islands, between Britain and Argentina, the same thing. The people living there are the most important people. Any situation where there is two countries arguing over a piece of land, I think the people living there are the ones we have to talk to most. But what do you think? Does your country have any territorial disputes? Do you think Gibraltar should stay British, should become Spanish, or should be allowed to be independent? I think that's what I think would be best, an independent Gibraltar. But Spain would never allow it, so I don't think it's possible. But let me know in the comments. Send me a message on Instagram, leave a comment on Spotify or on the Thinking in English blog. I'm really interested in your thoughts and opinions about today's episode. Not everyone agrees with me that the right to self-determination should be allowed for all peoples in all cases. And I want to know why. Why do you disagree? Why do you think Gibraltar should be part of Spain again, or should become independent, or some other option? Let me know. I'm really curious. But again, like I said at the beginning of the episode, please be nice. I don't choose whether Gibraltar is British or Spanish. It's not me who makes that decision, so don't be angry at me. When I recorded about the Falkland Islands, I got some very angry messages from Argentinian people. And when I recorded about Taiwan, same thing, got some very angry messages from Chinese people. So please just, be kind and be intellectual with your response. Give some evidence. Tell me why. Tell me what your opinion is. But as always, the best way to support the podcast is by leaving a like, rating, or review. We're almost at 4.5k, so 4,500 ratings on Spotify, which is insane. Can we get to 4,500 today? Hopefully. And go over to Instagram, follow me over there, nearly at 12,000 followers. And if you really want to improve your English, especially your English speaking and communication, join my conversation groups. We now have hundreds of people every week joining our conversation groups, speaking lots of English, making friends. I can see people improving every time they speak, every time they join the groups. And I want you all to join as well. The more people who join, the more conversation groups I can do. I said this a few months ago, and I meant it. If we had 1,000 people joining, we would have conversation groups every day. We would have conversation groups multiple times a day. We already do 6 a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'll put this out there. If we can get to 500 members, we'll probably do 9, 10 a week. We'll do 10 conversation groups a week if we can have 500 members. So it's an incentive for you all to join. The more you join, the more people who join, the more groups we'll do. And the price won't go up if you join now, right? So that's the benefit for you. Join now. Support the podcast. Improve your speaking. And I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.